Well, hello there. It's been some time since we've seen you last, and in the words of Rakim, we were trying to give you time to get the last one straight. But we are glad to be back in community, and we are glad to be with you. I am joined by what Asa Hilliard told me to call a Jenga or a jelly, and not just the griot, because the griot doesn't cover the.
Ace here, you're alpha.
What'd you say?
I said, Ace here, you're the alpha.
I don't know. I don't
I
know.
just asking. I just asking.
Yeah, I don't know. But I am. I once again.
But you have been his presence.
No, no. I've read his book.
Okay.
Yeah, I've
Okay.
read his book. I just read the one on what was it? The power of African power. But I digress. That individual I'm dialoguing with there is the Dr. Charles Alexander. He and I are working on a white paper. The creative amygdala is what we're doing, and the executive part of the creative brain. We're going to work on a white paper on that. He doesn't know it yet, but
Yes, we are. We're going to work on that.
but we are glad to have you join us today, and we're glad to be back. And I am glad that we all had an opportunity to go and sharpen our knives and come back a little bit and sharpen ourselves and go and engage in critical thought uh, in, in the various ways that we do. But we want to speak this morning on what we have all been experiencing. If you are, no matter where you are in the world, internationally, locally, domestically, we are looking at the telltale signs of the collapse of what was once believed to be the greatest place in the world to be. And we need you
Well,
all.
that's what they believed about themselves, anyway.
That, absolutely. And they still believe it. Here it is. We've got countries, China and Saudi Arabia and areas that are running circles around us, and we're still running around. Well, they are still running around beating their chests, talking about, we're the greatest country in the world. Well, it depends on what that rubric is based on. If in fact it's based on white supremacy, that might be you may be unparalleled. But if it's based on output, I think that that may not be a true statement. So as we look at this thing, is where we are because we're seeing several actions, seeing that we have not paid attention to before. It was never a problem when black folks were prosecuted, politically prosecuted. But this week we're all, a number of us, somewhat disheveled because it appears that there has been a political prosecution in the name of James Comey. And that's just one of the dominoes that has fallen. And I'm going to get out of the way here. And Mike, I'd like to get your opinion on what we're seeing and what we need to be doing in the renegotiation once this thing crumbles, because it's already collapsed. And Mike, in the green room, you had a demarcation of February 1968. February is an increasingly important month, as that was the same month in February, might have been 1951, in which uh, uh, Kwame Nkrumah took over as the uh, administrator in what was the Gold Coast, but the what would become Ghana. So, and then we had this week just brilliant presentations by African leaders at the UN that we have to pay attention to. So, Mike, with no further ado, I am ecstatic to be back in community with both of you. I should say community because I'm always in community with you, to be back live with you both.
Hey, good morning, Larry. Good morning, Joel. Uh, just, and I'll do this quickly and not get overrun. Uh, I picked 1968 as the beginning of the American decline. Uh, and that was in the middle or the kind of the height of the Vietnam War. America, short story, America had moved into Vietnam to replace the French that the Vietnamese had defeated to reclaim their country. And the United States was going to try to maintain that colonial hegemony in that part of the world as a way to contain the Chinese. The Vietnamese started the third armed struggle, this time against the United States. The first two was against the Japanese in World War II, and then the French right after World War II. And so the United States was the third one up, and they took them on. And that had been going back and forth for 10 years. The United States in the mid 60s started to up their presence, their more bigger military force. And in February 68, it was some kind of Buddhist holidays called Tet. And they launched an offensive that became known in history as the Tet Offensive. And for 5 weeks, they fought the United States to a standstill, overran major bases, etc., and basically surprised the whole world with their ability to fight the United States to a standstill. So you got the most mechanized and powerful army on the planet up against some rice farmers in black pajamas in Vietnam. For all intents and purposes, that's the way it looked. And basically, from that point on, the United States started losing ground in Vietnam. And even though they started this huge bombing campaign, it didn't work. And by 1972, the Vietnamese had run the United States out of Vietnam. I'm gonna say that again. Had run the United States out of Vietnam, and I point to that as one of those aha moments. For me, I'm 18, 19 years old. I'm freshman in college, and it's like, damn. But the whole world kind of said, damn, and it's kind of like these white boys ain't that tough. And what you started to see is different interests asserting themselves. And my the one that really got my attention was OPEC, the petroleum, the Mid East petroleum countries created OPEC to take control of the pricing and production of petroleum worldwide, because they produce more of it than anybody. And before, they didn't think they could do that because of the United States and Western interests militarily and stuff. But after Tet, they did, and in fact created an embargo in the early 70s that changed how oil was produced and sold throughout the world. And you saw the rise of those Middle Eastern oil producing countries after that. So I always picked that date as the beginning of the decline of the United States. You can start to see a rise in China. And one of the things that you just kind of have to understand is, and it's hard for us to understand it because we live in a microwave society now and everything is instant. You press a button and you got dinner. But things take time, they have to evolve. And so for me, when I look at the United States today and I look at basically Trump and what passes for the American ruling class or American elites, uh, I would say somebody forgot to take out the trash, and this fundamentally is over because if that this is the best they got, and I would suggest to us that the world is in the process of moving on. America over the next 10, 5, 10, 15 years will become increasingly more irrelevant. And we ought to start thinking about ourselves as not as us and not them. Okay, there's their reality, and then there's our reality, and the distinction I would make is the American creation story, and all creation stories are myth, ahistorical, and the history of America. And we do ourselves a terrible disservice when we believe the creation story that most people in America believe, white Americans believe about America, as opposed to the history of America. Because if you look at American history, Donald Trump is not an anomaly. MAGA is not an anomaly. This is a reoccurring occurrence in American history. But mainstream media and what passes for the American intelligentsia wants to somehow explain this as an apparition.
Let me ask you,
So,
let me
yeah,
ask both of you all this question. What should we look at as our creation story? Because I don't want, well, we certainly don't want to start with slavery. Because if you do, as my, I think it was
It's that about right there.
that said, if you start with if you start Black history with slavery, everything else looks like progress. And but I just don't think that that's where we should start. And I don't know if the fantasy that we were all kings and queens is an adequate place to start either.
uh, that's the fantasy. Well, first of all, if you take all creation stories as fantasy, then the absurd assumption that we're all the descendants of kings and queens, I guess you could say anything, and Santa Claus can deliver all the presents on Christmas Eve too. I think,
That's why I get mine right after Thanksgiving.
right, I think for me, I think we have to start with a fact, and the fact for us in the United States is we are the descendants of the African diaspora that whose ancestors were brought here as a function of the Atlantic uh, slave trade. Now that's the historical fact of why we find ourselves in this space today. That does not now. We were someplace before that. We've had history we made since we've been here, but for me, I don't see that as starting with slavery. I see that as starting with the fact of why am I in this place and how did I get here? And who am I? And so if you see yourself as an American, you really have disconnected yourself to your lineage and your history. If you see yourself
Say
as
that again, Mike Jones, please. Please say it again.
I, I say, if you see yourself as American, you disconnected yourself to your history and who you are. If you say I am a member of the African diaspora, that means your connection is to a world at a time that's bigger than this place. Now you can read all sorts of things into that. You can damn near make up any kind of creation story you wanted after that. But I think for us to have a grasp on reality, it starts with that identity. Who am I? why am I here? How did I get here? As Kierkegaard said, why was I not consulted? Who was the director? I want to talk to him. Okay, I mean that fundamentally you start with that reality, that premise. I'm a, I am a descendant of the African diaspora that landed in the United States, and then you can trace your journey from there going forward. And that's not starting with slavery for me.
And I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think one of our problems is that we don't we don't for our own edification read whatever it is that whatever it is that we whatever it is that we have to read, and our knowledge about Africa and the diaspora is predicated on white folks, and so we stuck on it as this what they don't want you to know. Well, of course they're the oppressor, and so we can't keep blaming our ignorance on the oppressor. So what we'll say is this is what they don't want you to know. Well, nigga, they don't want you to know nothing. Because they're the oppressor. Not only are they the oppressor, this is in documented state and federal congressional record. So you ain't got to guess this. You ain't got to guess this. They don't want us to know nothing. And so whatever it is that we are to know, that we should know, is predicated on our own curiosity, our own willingness and ability to learn.
Doc, on
And
that
so
line, and I just want to add this real quick. There's a book called On Tyranny, and in that book, the author Snyder talks about just how big a burden it is for one to take full ownership of their own freedom. Doc, did you freeze?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Looks like you froze on me. I didn't mean that to happen, Doc.
froze or y'all froze?
You
I'm
froze.
back. I think
Okay.
y'all froze. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, but I mean, just the burden of taking one's own freedom and not being responsible for and adhering to the dictates of one others in this society is a burden to most people.
But
It
Larry,
is the burden, and if the source that you're citing is saying that we have an undue burden, I actually agree with that. But at the end of the day, that's our burden.
Well, he was criticizing it. The book is on tyranny, and he's like, you have to take advantage. You have to take agency over yourself. And I
No,
understand.
no, that's my point. That's
Yeah,
my point. That's my
yeah,
point.
you're
And
right.
so if he's arguing that we have to take on tyranny, I agree with that. But I also understand why we don't, like in mask, because it is literally hard to be oppressed. That's by definition, we should understand that. And so, but my thing is, we got to do the work to understand how we got to be who we are. And that's not the work that we willingly do.
Right.
Now,
that, just,
on the
just,
level set, we do this work. I'm sorry, Mike Jones, and then
okay.
on the level set,
Dr. Alexander,
we
can you
do this
push your
work.
screen back so we can see your whole face?
On
Thank you.
the level set, we do this work. But I don't think that everybody does this work, right? And so the thing is not that we are oppressed, and not that we behave a certain way because we are oppressed. The work is, why do we behave the way that we behave because we are oppressed? And that's what we do here on the level set.
Let me say that this is for the church folks out there. I'm not church folks, but if I have a knock on black preachers, I won't go so far as call theologians, because I'm not sure if that's accurately descriptive, but we take what people know or believe they know, and don't use it to expand their understanding. Because basically, the point that both you brothers just raised, there it will be hundreds of black preachers today, because it's Sunday morning, quoting Paul when he said, "When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I thought as a child, I acted as a child. When I became a man, I had to put aside childish things." What you are talking about, the agency that Charles just referenced, the question that you raised, Larry, is at some point you become grown. And with that comes the responsibility of your agency. So when you were a child, either
The
actually or
responsibility of being grown, right?
the responsibility of being grown, right? When you were a child, we could make adjustments and exceptions for you. At some point, you're now grown, and this is yours to pick up. It don't make no difference whether it's fair, if it's right. Some loads are heavier than others. Some loads are lighter than others. Some people start further up the mountain than others. All that is now irrelevant. You have to put aside the childish things and think and act as an adult. So, as George Clinton, the P Funk master, says, who won't get quoted this Sunday morning, but he ought to. When
Your
you free
mind,
your when you free your mind, your ass will
your
follow, and,
ass will follow.
and therein is ought to be the sermon of the day.
And I don't think there's a better sermon, and there's not a better time to to address that, because that's where we are. We are in a place where we, for some reason, feel wedded to this thing. But even I'm seeing, even in protest of this thing, there still is a yearning to be a part of it. I'm looking at these boycotts, which are admirable. But at the end of the day, at the end of a boycott, you plan on going and doing business with that person instead of building your own. Uh,
Larry, that's our great paradox. And and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's our great paradox. In that we keep saying we black and this is what we do. But ultimately, and the history states, this is not me, this is not my thought on it. This is what the history states. Is that as long as we've been here, we've been asking for acceptance. And so we keep saying, we can do this and we can do that and da da da, and the black people, and black people make this much money and da da da. We say all of that, But at the end of the day, our collective psyche is such that we want approval from white folks. And and I'm not saying to you that I understand how we got to that. I'm just saying that we have to be honest about where we are. And that's where we are.
And that is 100% where we are. And I'm saying that we have sufficient knowledge to understand that that's
This
not
thing.
this thing. And
Yes.
and we have document after document, example after example that this doesn't serve us. We don't. I
It
mean,
doesn't serve us.
for
And
500. I
we
mean, if you
continue to
you want to
buy
look
into this
at
thing.
one thing, Doc. If Mike Jones, you want to look at one thing. There are 500 Fortune, they're the Fortune 500 companies. There are 8 black CEOs. That should tell you everything you need to know.
Well,
Or
Larry,
that should
but
tell you.
to that point, and I would put Obama being president in this bucket as well. Does more black CEOs in a mercenary capitalist society benefit the masses of black people? Okay, so that
Absolutely.
means
No, no,
so the critique should not be about we ain't enough of us CEOs. The
absolutely.
critique ought to be American capitalism and what it does. So
To
for
us.
me,
What
yeah,
I'm saying is because, see, we are still sending our children to school, sitting next to individuals, acting as if an education for a black child and education for a white child can be comparable in that setting. But those are two very, very different things.
And
And
my thing is, Larry, we don't even understand that.
And so
no
we
more.
got to, so we need to, but because there's a lack of consciousness in the private, and I'm gonna deal with, I'm just gonna say this real quick. Dr. Alexander, and I'm gonna use you as an example. Your effectiveness as a psychologist is not just based on the fact that you understand the brain and psychology, but it is your political and historical background that has you
That's that's what makes me
uniquely,
good.
but it makes you great. It makes you great because you understand that, and you understand that politics that black subjects are subject to create mental disorientation. And so this lack of consciousness that we have is killing us coming and going. And we don't
Yes, sir.
understand it. That's the reason why we drive past the Korean store, the Asian store, the white store to go to a job that we hate and with our business degrees, to go to a job that we hate and get a fraction of the money and then come back and have to patronize things that we don't even own and operate in our own community. There's a conscious problem there.
Awesome, awesome point, attorney. And so my I this is not my goal. I think this is the goal of the level set. Is that ain't happen by that's not happenstance,
No, no.
right? This is how the system works. This is how the system works. And so to your point, we bypass all of these things to go and you're a profit for the oppressor. And so my take on all of it is that we just got to understand that. We can just understand that whatever we're doing, and this is where we struggle. This is where we struggle. And so we love Michael Jordan. He's the high praise. He's so if we go to 40 what was my man's book the my man from New York, what was his book?
Which one?
about the
Amos Wilson?
I'm a man from about the slave. The writer, the
Oh,
black writer,
Richard Wright?
is about the 40 million the forty
I mean,
million
oh, talking
dollars.
about $40 million slave. Talking about Bill Rhoden.
Bill Rhoden,
Yeah, $40 million slave.
the $40 million slave. There's not enough of us who have read that book, right?
I
And
have a,
so,
I bought a paperback copy for Mike Jones. I've been waiting to give it to him for 2 years.
Okay.
and so, not enough of us have read that book. And so, and then even the number of us who've read that book think that the book is about basketball, but the book is about our existence in this space. And so, and this is the whole thing. So in St. Louis, you got Negroes that don't eat every day. They don't eat every day. Be like, well, Brother Stewart, he the richest joker in Missouri. And he is that. But that don't fill your belly. And so we caught up in this capitalist thing, and we think that that thing pays out to all of us, and it don't. It pay out to the capitalists. And so my man is killing the game. And I'm not even saying that he don't even. I'm not saying he's not a. I'm not saying he's not a good steward. He probably is a good steward. Larry, you know this better than I. You talk to the guy. But at the end of the day, if you live in whatever's left of public housing in St. Louis, my man ain't thinking of my man. Well, I can't say he ain't thinking of you, but I'm saying my man ain't doing nothing for you.
So,
And that's the facts of the matter. Not because he don't care, but because that's how this thing works.
Charles, let me uh, put something on the table. There are two schools of thought in Western philosophy about reality: materialism and idealism. They separate themselves like this. A materialist is somebody who thinks consciousness, reality, everything you understand about the world is a function of the material environment you find yourself in. An idealist believes that your understanding of reality, while maybe impacted by the material circumstances, is independent of that. That there is a reality that exists inferiorly. That you can understand the world through this idea. Now, at some point they join, but you can separate all Western intellectual theory based on those two, that dichotomy: materialism versus idealism. I am going to suggest that we're stuck in the materialist construct because we keep feeling that literally to be free, you have to impact the material conditions that you find yourself in. I'm going to suggest that your agency in who you are is grounded in idealism, that who you understand yourself to be is independent of the circumstances that you find yourself in. So that if you had truly liberated yourself, where you go to work, where you buy stuff, are just tactical decisions that you make based on your own convenience. They are not drivers of who you are, because uh, uh, along with being an idealist goes another philosophical concept, the notion of the a priori truth. And that just means this is true before the fact. It's true because it's true. And it literally doesn't have to be proven. It's just, it's true.
Yep.
And so I'm suggesting that if we liberated ourselves from this material condition intellectually, we would then understand all of this through a different lens, through a different construct. And at that point in time, you become extraordinarily dangerous, because nobody can control what you think and nobody knows what you're thinking. Now, assuming we all had that, then what's going on at Target, whatever the machinations and insanity of white America is, would have a physical impact, but it would really have no psychological or intellectual impact on how we understood ourselves and how we were going to behave. Because at that point, you're always ahead of whatever the material conditions, because you have understanding. So I'm going to say it, since all three of us are sports junkies here, that for the average uninformed fan, when they're watching a game, any game, they think they're watching the physical
They
game.
don't understand bet cuts.
Yeah, they're watching the physical game in that moment. And in
They
reality,
don't know why the guy come free
right,
for the open
exactly.
shot.
Right, exactly. So what you really are looking at is these players' intellectual understanding of the game in that moment. That's why their behavior was that. And
Yeah.
because they're all reading off the same intellectual playbook, they see the same things. And they know, because I've played with you so long, you got this experience, I got this experience. We understand what's going on here. If I'm here, you'll be there. So it's like a quarterback looking to his right the whole
So so
for three
so Mike
seconds, and
so
then
Mike.
turning and throwing to his left, because he knows, based on what he sees over here, he knows what's going on over there. So he's not a captive of the environment. He's reading and understanding, and he's intellectually ahead of whatever it is you're looking at. So I ask people all the time, what are you looking at? And they'll tell you what they're looking at. And then I say, tell me what you see then. Because if we talk about quarterbacks, when a college quarterback throws an interception, he gets reamed out by the coach. When a pro quarterback throws an interception, he comes to the sideline, the coordinator, coach, asks him one question: what did you see? Okay, because obviously you saw something. Because I know every decision you're making is an informed decision. And the real question is, what did you read? What did he didn't read, or whatever? And so that's a different way of understanding reality and who you are in reality. And it goes back again to my George Clinton quote: "When you free your mind, your ass will follow, man."
And that's excellent. That's an excellent piece. And so what you're saying Mike, is that we don't do film study. We like sports, but even in sports, we love sports because the reason that we love sports is because we excel in sports, but we
And
don't
in
do
that
the work.
moment, like Sisyphus, you're free. You really have, you really had that existential freedom in that moment. Same way with
The
music,
person that's doing it,
right? The person that's doing it.
the rest of us, the rest of us be like, so let's take Mike. Let's take Mike. So I was a young I was y'all know the first professional game. What was the first professional game that Michael Jordan played?
I don't remember. If I knew, I don't remember.
Me either.
It was at the Kill in St. Louis. He played his first game with the Chicago Bulls.
Oh, it was
His first,
preseason. It was a preseason game
yes,
because he came
yes,
to the front. Because he came to the front house
yes. You
afterwards.
know that,
Okay,
Mike Jones. You
okay,
know that.
okay.
The first professional game that Michael Jordan played was in St. Louis. Yes? You know that, Mike Jones.
And Floyd brought him to the frat house.
Now, Larry might not know that because Larry Alpha, he don't know it. But
And the Kappa house was around the corner. Okay.
I know that. I know that because me and my brother, me and my brother we're sports fans, and so we was following Michael Jordan the whole time. So there's nothing that Michael Jordan did that was exceptional to me and my brother because we did all of that. And so when Michael Jordan came, to your point, he came to St. Louis and he came to the frat house, right? He came to
Yep.
see y'all.
And for the record,
That's
he's an Omega, and Mike Jones is an Omega, and Grover Johnson's an Omega.
and that's why he came to the frat house. And so, he came to St. Louis, got his rocks off, killed them guys in that game that I was there at. I saw Michael Jordan play his first professional game. His first professional game was a preseason game in St. Louis. I saw that. And Mike Jones knows that he came to the frat house. That's cultural continuity. Michael Jordan could have came in and flew out, and y'all never knew, right, Mike?
Right.
That could have happened. The fact that it didn't happen speaks to him. It speaks to him and his respect for Omega Psi Phi. Because if he didn't respect Omega Psi Phi, he wouldn't have went to frat house, right?
Right.
And so that's the thing, and that's where we struggle along the line. Like we hitch our horses to all kind of shit because of motherfucking black. We gonna do that. No, you got to bet him. You got to make sure he the guy. You got to make sure she the girl, right? We can't hitch on to them because they're black. We got to know that they are who they are. This guy that's the representative, the big sis in St. Louis. You got Negroes talking about, well, we want him to represent us. He don't represent y'all.
Those respectability politic folk.
He don't do that, right,
Yeah.
Larry?
Well, no,
He ain't that guy.
that's Apex candidate. That's not ours.
He works for Apex. That's the truth. Them the facts.
Yep. Yep. We've got to go through them to get anything. out of
And
that.
so we don't have to go through them locally. Now it might look like whatever it looks like, you know, nationally, but locally, and that's our problem is that we don't understand local politics. And Mike Jones speaks on this all the time. Is that when you grab that corner, you got to keep that corner. If you can't keep that corner, nigga, you ain't nobody.
That's it. If that is it,
You grab that corner, you got to keep that corner.
that is correct. And
If you can't keep that corner,
It
then it
ain't
don't
yours.
matter.
it's not yours. It's not
It
yours.
ain't your corner. Yeah.
It's not
And
yours.
and so when we talk about Homer G. Phillips, when we talk about the hospital, Homer G came and grabbed that car. He came and grabbed that corner collectively. And I know this is I know I'm not underestimating the fight, but we know in order for Homer G. Phillips to fight the fight that he fought, that he was fighting he was fighting against the system. He wasn't fighting against, no, you know, no tooth white folks,
No.
which is what we that so part of our problem is that we think that we're fighting against guys that don't have no money and da 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 blah blah blah, we think that we're fighting against guys, you know, what our stereotype is. Whatever our stereotype is of white supremacists, that's who we think we're fighting.
Right.
But our stereotype, if we're gonna keep the stereotype, it gotta grow and understand that we're fighting against white supremacy, and white supremacy, it exists across levels. White supremacy don't have nothing to do with class. White supremacy is white supremacy. And we don't understand that. And
We
so we keep fighting these fights. Like even now, we fight, we like, well, Trump is this, that, or the other. Trump is just a cog in the wheel of white supremacy. I'm not saying that he's not an effective cog. He is an effective cog because he already had a media personality. And white folks, and so this other thing is that white folks are just as vulnerable to the media as we are, which is why we got Trump. But we don't understand that. And so, but at the end of the day, the people who want all of this thing to be white, they picked Trump. Trump didn't pick them. And we keep our targets are wrong. Our targets are predicated on Trump. And we need to fight Trump. I'm not saying we don't. We need to fight Trump. But if it's not Trump, it's going to be somebody else because that's what white supremacy does. We don't understand that.
Charles, I want to say I'm going to make I'm going to agree with you about the premise of white supremacy, but I'm going to argue a different point about Trump being effective in all control systems in any society, any organization.
Mike Jones is a career politician.
You're really running a con, okay? And a con is how you take advantage of people by making them think they're okay and they give you what you want. So you don't have to steal it from them or rob it. And in fact, because people know when they're being robbed and they know when something's being stolen. So when and what a professional at the con will tell you is not enough to con them. You got to keep them kind. That's how you can walk away. And whatever they gave you, they glad they gave it to you. It'll be maybe never before they figure out they was taken advantage of. But if you walk in the door with a gun and a mask and say stick them up, or people came home and the house or the business was busted in and the safe was blown open and stuff, they know they've been taken advantage of. Trump is an armed robber. America used to run a con, and while they still got the story of the con, they no longer have the skill and the expertise to hustle like that. So now they got to take shit that you used to give them and was happy to give it to them. So if you look at all of this shit as a criminal enterprise, the real question is how people are trying to get paid. What you always want to do is create a situation where people give you what you want without you even having to ask for it, and they give you what you want because you create the illusion that you just gave them something that was important to them. It didn't mean shit to you, but you made them feel it was important to them, and it was important to you when you gave it to them. And they become grateful. And because they're grateful, they give you what you wanted. Literally, that's why it's called a con. It's a confidence game. And inherent in human nature is when I pretend to trust you, you instinctively want to trust me. And you'll give me, and I'm going to give you something first of value, or at least appears to have value. It's worthless to me, but it'll appear to have value to you, and you'll think it was important to me. And once I give you that, you're prepared to give me something back. One of our favorite movies, when Don Corleone is talking to Sollozzo in the office, and Sollozzo tells him what the deal is. You know, we need the judges, we need the politicians, also need $1 million, but you get all of this. Don called it. Now, Sonny jumped at it, but I always remember what Don Corleone said. It's the thing you should always ask when somebody offers you some shit that you didn't ask for. He said, what did I do to deserve this generosity? So I know I'm not being played because you just volunteered.
You offered me some shit I ain't asked for.
Yeah, you gonna give me some shit I ain't asked you for. Okay, I didn't come here to get that. You came here to see me, and you come here with a gift. The gift. So if I accept the gift and I feel grateful, what is it that I'm gonna owe you, or what is it that you go expect? So if you don't know how to hustle, you'll always get played. And when you don't know how to hustle, you become the robber or the burglar. Because the only way you know how to get paid is to take some shit and everybody know it's missing. My father used to have, he would say, when you're a good hustler, you never take it all. You just take something every day.
My mother used to say that she's never met a con man she didn't like.
That's it. And my brother has a corollary to my father's proposition of a good hustler never takes it all. My brother says, and the reason you never take it all is because they'll know what's missing.
I know it's missing.
And so Trump and them agreed. There was a time American capitalists post World War II, because they weren't like that in the 20s and 30s either, hustled Americans in the world by making them thinking they were participating in this great experience.
And they still are thinking that they're participating in a great experience.
No, you know what? They now wonder where's this shit? What happened to it? Because
Well,
they thought they was in the deal,
yeah,
and now you're robbing them,
yeah,
and
you're right.
they know
Mm.
that they are not benefiting, and they're confused because they thought they saying, "What's the matter? Ain't we partners no more? What happened? What happened to
All they have to
IE?"
rely on is that whiteness. And,
Right, and
and
that's what they thought made them part of the kind, as opposed to being the victim of the kind. That for the average white person, being white is absolutely worthless. Except it
absolutely.
makes you, economically it's worthless, politically it's worthless, but it does, as what is it Du Bois called it?
Double consciousness.
No, the wages of racism or white supremacy, that you think because you bought into this that you are now like us. John C. Calhoun, who's really the political architect of the Confederate South, and truly extraordinarily brilliant cat. He gave this speech in the U.S. Senate around 1840 sometime, and he said, "In America, it's not the division is not between rich and poor; it's between black and white. And if you're white, as long as you basically uh, do what you're supposed to do, support what we're doing, then you'll always be part of this ruling class. So your broke white ass now thinks you're a plantation owner and you're a sharecropper because somebody hustled you because you was white and you bought that shit. Didn't cost him nothing.
Not at all. In fact, it benefited him. It maintained the status quo because it kept you from demanding
Right.
what you should be entitled to.
Because if you got to remember, part of the problem that they had in the 1600s was the enslaved black people and the indigenous white people, the indigenous work. They started to have really trouble with trying to maintain order and keeping the economy going. And fundamentally, that's why they got rid of indentured servitude and went straight with race-based chattel slavery. Just just because they were in the process of creating class divisions based along economics and didn't have anything to do with race.
And that would
But
have
then again, that's a part of the history we don't understand. And white folks always go for the race part.
always, it's the easiest thing to do. Let's switch tracks now, and we need to deal with this issue that surrounds our brother Ian Roberts, as it relates to he being, in my opinion, kidnapped, and shipped off to a place where we have no knowledge about at this point. And so, Dr. Alexander, I'd like for you to give us a backstory on this brilliant educator, and for us to uh, get up to speed on where he is as I see your screen disappear. But if you don't mind, Doc.
And that's the problem, Larry. We don't know where he is. We don't know where Ian is. And and I'm not arguing.
Let's
Charles,
let's
tell
let's
us,
give some context to it.
yeah,
Ian
tell us who
Roberts,
he is.
the
Uh,
educator.
So Ian, so first of all, he the Nupes. He one of my guys.
Which means he's one of my guys. So
And so he's a
there is
member
no
of Jabba
division.
we
Psi
all
Alpha
cousins.
Fraternity and Cobra. Yeah. And so, but that guy, the reason that I know him is because he came to St. Louis and did tremendous things as the assistant superintendent of St. Louis Public Schools. He did tremendous things. That's why I know him, because of St. Louis. And Ian is a guy who gives all his heart and all his love to the kids. And so Mike Jones, if you take the Q's stance on what the Q's do about the frack, Ian did that for kids, right? That's all of his heart, all of his love was for kids. He just happened not to be a Q. He the Nupes. And so he did that in St. Louis. And because he did that in St. Louis, he then had an opportunity to be a superintendent on the West Coast. So he went to the West Coast and he did it on the West Coast. Because he's consistent, because he's pure. That's what he does. He's not a guy, he's not a guy that utilizes his relative, his relative professional comeuppance for him. He does that for the people. So he did that. He did that in St. Louis, and before he came to St. Louis, he was doing that on the East Coast. He's doing. I think he was doing this in Maryland, and so he did it in Maryland, and then he came to St. Louis and he did the same thing in St. Louis, and then he had an opportunity to be a superintendent because he was an assistant. So I think he was an assistant superintendent in St. Louis, and that's where I met him. He had an opportunity to do it on the West Coast. So he went to the West Coast and he did it at a high level in the West Coast. I'm not sure if he was in LA or if he was in Oakland, but he did it. He knocked it out the park. The school board in Iowa, for whatever reason, thought that he was a guy that they needed. Now, when I say whatever reason, I'm not saying not because he was I know on the competency level he was on their radar. But come on now, this is Iowa. Iowa could hire a white person to do whatever the white person can do in the school board situation. And so obviously, to me, they thought M was better than anybody that they had locally. And they brought him in. But what you got to know about Ian is that he's a dandy. That joker is smart. He's an author. He's a published author. He a published author. And he speaks nationally about educational leadership. He's a guy, right? And he takes care of himself. He's exceptionally fit. And he's a dandy in the course of the manner in which he dresses. And so I know he dresses better than everybody in Ian dresses better than everybody in Des Moines, Iowa. And so I can understand between his intellect and the way that he presents that he was a target. I had been telling myself, I need to call that brother and be like, why are you there? because I didn't think it, when I realized that he was there, I didn't think it was a safe space for him. But obviously, the school district of Des Moines, Iowa, thought that he should be there. Now, and full disclosure, my uncle was a political figure for millions of years in Des Moines. And so I'm clear on what Des Moines looks like. My uncle Robert was he was a local. He had a local presence, and he had a national presence as relative to Des Moines in terms of the political capital of Des Moines. But when Ian went there, I was like, why did you go there? And I just didn't call that guy and ask him why he went there. But now we see that that wasn't a safe space for him because I didn't think it was a safe space for him when he went there. But we got to know, we got to know, particularly in these times, that they coming for us. And what I think that happened to Ian Roberts is a situation where there was somebody who wanted that position, the superintendent of Des Moines Public Schools. There was somebody who wanted that position and beat him, and that person was a Trump Republican, and they said, "Go after this guy." I have no reason to believe that he wasn't doing everything that he needed to do to make sure that he was straight, you know, with the federal, you know, with the
Immigration,
federal,
immigration.
yeah, all of that. I have no reason to believe that because this guy, again, this guy, first of all, he works for the government. He a public school official. I have no reason to believe that he was not taking care of all of his business.
And you know, we don't think international enough because we fail to realize just how many of our sisters and brothers are have an international background and that may be in similar situations.
And
And
to your point, Larry, and to
protect
your point, Larry, so when Mexicans and people from Central and South America start getting deported, Negroes like, yep, that's what they get for so that's what they get for voting for Trump. We never considered that in this fight that there were black people impacted by that as well. People from Africa, people from Jamaica, people from the islands, the Caribbean islands, who were trying to come into the United States. And so we was just like, oh, yeah, that's what they get. But it's not just what they get because at the end of the day, they got rights because that's what the United States said. The United States said you got rights, and you can level those rights to fight your fight. And right now, you can't level those rights to fight your fight. And when we look at Ian is a guy who is and has been a public official. And so the narrative sounds like he's been like, you know, so the narrative, per like New York Times, the narrative is like he's been, subversive. He's not subversive. Ian is a guy who works in education, takes care of all his kids. He's wherever he lives, New York, St. Louis. I think he was in Oakland. I think he was in Oakland when he was on the West Coast, and then now he's in Des Moines, Iowa. He's a
Charles,
guy that
Charles,
takes care of all his kids regardless.
Charles, my apologies for interruption, but based on what you said, I'll make an observation and I'll disagree with you on one point. He was subversive. That as an educator, particularly a black educator who was elevating the intellectual
You're
mental
absolutely
capacity
correct, Mike Jones.
of
We
children.
don't disagree on that. We don't
Okay.
disagree on that.
Well, I
Yeah.
know we don't. That's why I was pointing. You was focused there, but by definition,
Yeah.
and for you to be a black guy and doing it also in Iowa
He's a
related to white
revolutionary,
children. Yeah, that's
and that's why he's in
overturning.
the situation that he's
Right
in.
now, our problem is we don't always understand when we're doing revolutionary work. Okay,
That's the word. Yes,
yeah,
you're right, Mike Jones.
and so that's because going back to the beginning of the show, we bought into the creation narrative and we think this is all the way it's supposed to go. And if we bought into the history, we be understanding we are that he is as subversive as Harriet Tubman, because in a different kind of way, he's leading people to freedom, and that undermines the status quo. So that would be that's the only comment I wanted to make on that.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's the thing. So what Ian has been doing in his respective roles is revolutionary, and that's why they coming after.
And
Yeah, you are absolutely right.
And we all need to understand that. And as a and that's a great place. This is an outstanding place to transition to Sister Asada Shakur, who is now an ancestor, because it has all of the elements that you both just spoke about. We're talking about a revolutionary, a person that fought for black people's rights until the day she died. We're talking about an individual that that fled this criminal enterprise under false indictment and sentencing, and moved a mere 90 miles off the coast of Florida to live out her life under surveillance, and each and every director of the FBI and each and every president in my entire lifetime sought to have her
Expedite.
extradited from Cuba to back to the United States to face what clearly is a horrible indictment and so forth. So I'd like to get you all's thoughts on Sister Shakur.
I'm gonna swing it back to you real quick, Larry. And so when we was in college, that's when Public Enemy hit. The rap group Public Enemy, they hit. And and one of Chuck D's courses is a follower of Chesimard. Nobody knew who that was. That's her name. That's her name. Before she was Asada Shakur, she was Chesimard. That's her last name. That's who he was talking about in the rap. And I think we need to all understand we don't need to get confused with, you know, this thing that we don't need to get confused about this thing that the industry has created, because rap, rap music at its essence, it's about Black people. It's about the struggle. It's about how we lived. So now, certainly it has evolved to a different thing, but that's not where it started. And Chuck D and Public Enemy, they're a prime example about how this thing started. And so she is a revolutionary. And if you haven't read her book, you need to read her book because it also gives you some counter narratives about the Black Panthers from a person who was a Black Panther. Um, you know, in terms of organization and what the real, like what the capacity of the Black Panthers were. And I'm not a person who is trying to, talk crazy about the Black Panthers. We just need to understand the Black Panthers and all relative movements. We need to understand the Black Power movement. We need to understand the Civil Rights movement. We need to understand the freedom movement, all within the context of this thing that we live in.
I would add the Pan-African movement also, because they parallel.
All of it. All of it. We need to understand all of it within the context of this, right? And and so just because you threw it out there, Larry, if we talking about the Pan African movement, then we need to understand the Pan African movement is not a function of W.E.B. Du Bois. He was a part of it, but he ain't the guy, right? But we think he the guy, and the reason that we think he the guy is because white folks said that they comfortable with him being the guy.
Yeah, and you know what's amazing about that? A major proponent of that, and most African world leaders give credit to Marcus Garvey for being a major inspiration in that. And the ridicule that just the harsh ridicule that W.B. Du Bois imposed on Marcus Garvey is really antithetical to his intellect. In doing so. But I mean, I just find that to be an
And,
interesting.
and that's how we get to Sister Secure. Shakur, is that we got all of these false narratives. And she died maintaining that she didn't kill the police officer. And so who gave any credence to her argument? I know what the enemy gonna say. The enemy gonna say she guilty. But amongst us, who gave credence to her piece, right? And I know that it was short. I know that it's limited because we we pick our enemies based on them. There's no there's no history in which Cuba sided with the colonizer. No, there's absolutely no history in which Cuba sided with the colonizer. Black folks in the United States don't like Cuba because the United States don't like Cuba because Cuba is independent.
And they,
Charles,
and they kicked the gangsters out.
yeah, let me jump in, and I'm not going to say anything about the sisters specifically because uh, uh, my memory is not. I can't go back. I can't. My recall ain't that great because you really talking about a long time ago. But I think we probably should do something about the '60s because I'm a product of that era. My adolescence started in the
Y'all the
mid.
same age.
Huh? Yeah, I know. Same age. And if you or your age, and all of you all are good and grown. Okay, everybody's 60 years old, so it ain't like you no kids. But you would have had to been there to understand how different the black community was in that moment. Not the whole black community, but where we were intellectually, politically,
But
the
the people
culture.
that you was moving with, Mike, right?
But they dominated the culture too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so think about what hip hop did. Okay, and you're talking about NWA, you're talking about Public Enemy, you're talking that fundamentally, not everybody wasn't doing, but fundamentally they started to define what it meant to be black at a certain age and what that was. I want you to try to imagine what the '60s was like. Now, here was what here was a legitimate black position that nobody that you could take and nobody black would publicly object even if they wanted to disagree with you. The revolutionary black position was white activists were anti-war because the anti-war in Vietnam War was a big deal, and 58,000 casualties, and it was all draftees, and it was poor black kids, poor black boys, and poor white boys because rich boys like George W. Bush and Donald Trump didn't get drafted and didn't go. But if you ask white activists, they were against the war in Vietnam and wanted it to end. If you ask black activists in 1968, 1970, are you against the war in Vietnam? The answer would be no. I'm not against the war in Vietnam. In fact, I support the war in Vietnam. I support the right of the Vietnamese people for self-determination. I'm anti-imperialist. The United States is an imperialist power. The war is racist. Muhammad Ali,
That's why we got Mike Jones.
Muhammad Ali, you could
That's
sum
why we
up.
got Mike Jones.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That all of that. Now, by the time Reagan comes into being, there's a white reaction again. But literally, if you ask, and it was the black position, and Muhammad Ali was asked, well, why wouldn't he go to Vietnam? He said, I'm a black man that don't have any issue with the yellow man in Vietnam. And basically, and literally, this is his quote: "Ain't no Viet Cong ever called me a nigger. So what am I mad about?" So the whole point
You
was,
my oppressor.
huh? Right, and that's the point. I'm talking about what had captured the black consciousness, and that went from everything from afros and dashikis, superficial stuff, to much more deeper things. Was we had literally intellectually, culturally separated. That at America in that time, it was us and it was them. That literally, so what I was saying earlier in the segment about being intellectually or psychologically free, that's what we were. That literally, there was nothing America had that we were interested in. Now, I'm not saying that's everybody in the black community, but to beat Clarence Thomas was to be illegitimate. Okay, there was no place for, like, you're talking about black politicians today, and American politics is always had its underside, but just like we romanticize gangsters to say, well, there's certain things we won't do. Okay, one of my uh, metaphorical stories is I say that I could have been a 15-year-old drug dealer if I had wanted to be. And people will invariably ask why, because of your parents, church. I said, no, the dope man wouldn't let me be a 14, 15-year-old drug dealer, period. The game was for grown men and kids that couldn't do the game. Matter of fact, if you were dealing with kids and that you would hope the police get you before somebody else gets you. So again, that was a whole different mindset, and it literally terrified. Not literally, if you think about the black assassinations from Mark Clark to Fred Hampton, uh, Huey Newton locked up, Rap Brown, I can't think of Rap's name now. Kwame Ture had to leave the country.
But
So I
that's the other
mean,
point, Mike
and all
John.
the people who
Go ahead.
what's
I'm
that?
just saying that's the other point. Go ahead.
No, no, and I was just saying, and that also became connected to a global movement. So there's not just this, so it was a pan African movement. It literally was an anti-white Western imperialist metaphor, and we would say in 1968, 1970 that we could be in the insurrection because we were in the belly of the beast. And that's the way we refer, how we thought of being in America as being in the belly of the beast. So and you got to remember, that's Tommy, John Carlos and Tommy Smith. They got put out the Olympic Village. Okay, now that doesn't look like a big deal now, but that was a bigger deal than Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. But it was the same
Impact.
kind of thing. And you got to remember, there were ball players. Uh, Lou Alcindor at the time, he wasn't Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Literally the greatest college basketball player in the history of the game, particularly in that moment, and high school player, refused to go to the Olympics. And there were black ball players that
Is
went.
Blue Alcindor the GOAT?
Huh?
He the GOAT?
Well,
On and off the court.
I put it like this. I think I have to look at great basketball players like I do musicians. There ain't no greatest tenor saxophone player, greatest piano player. There are great piano players, and you can have your favorite, okay? But at a certain level, great is great, and I don't know how you
So Blue
differentiate it.
Alcindor is amongst the greats.
Oh, hell yeah, and for me, the way I look at the game, particularly historically, I separate the big men from everybody else because how they played and how they impacted the game was totally different than guys on the
Because it's
perimeter.
predicated on their point guard.
Uh, yeah and no. You talking about historically, the game was played inside out. When you came down the court, it was going into the low block and then coming back out. But it started to have a great team. You had to have a great center. So at their point, they're defining the game, but their skill set was so different than a perimeter player. So, and now we think of perimeter players as what it means to be a basketball player, and that is true. They were great perimeter players, but you don't compare Elgin Baylor with Will Chamberlain or Bill Russell. I mean,
But you saw all of those guys, Mike Jones. So
yeah.
who who in today's game would you compare any of those guys in terms of their basketball acumen and the truths?
I would I would say an elite player today. Now we're talking about the great ones now. The elite player today would be an elite player then, and vice versa. Now remember, Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, Elgin Baylor were getting 35 a night, and Chuck Taylor, okay, and flying coach, okay.
They're gonna get theirs regardless.
Right, yeah, right. So they didn't have the cold tub after the game and all of that. So I wouldn't compare like that. So I think the basket is still 10 feet high, and the only thing harder than hitting the major league fastball is probably making a contested jump shot. Okay, and it didn't get, and it has not gotten any easier.
Consistently,
Huh?
consistently
Consistently, right?
making a contested jump shot
Yeah,
consistently.
because the ball is a little smaller than the hole than the basket, and it's 10 feet off the floor, and you're 15, 20 feet from the basket with somebody in your face, and you can make that shot 45% of the time. Uh, that's that's incredible. Or like I say, it's second only to hitting the baseball, throwing at 95 miles an hour, 60 feet away on a bat that's just a little wider than the ball. Okay, and the ball is not only coming that fast, but it's also moving. So I don't. I like to say favorite, and then I also take the great one, and I'll separate them into two categories. There are all-time great players, and then there are players who are transformational. Will Chamberlain, Bill Russell are transformational players. Julius Erving is a transformational player. The game changed after Doc because it started to be played above the rim at a different level. Steph Curry is a transformational player. Uh, Larry Bird is a great player. Michael Jordan is a great player. Magic Johnson is a transformational player. That the whole notion when you saw the Lakers in Showtime, we have a word for it now. It's called transition. But what they were doing is fast breaking off a basket, man, and you literally had nobody seen it, and somebody, and he's throwing a pass
That
30
was
feet up the
not
floor.
a part of the NBA, right?
Right. Okay. Now that's standard practice. But then it's like listening to Charlie Parker for the first time. Damn, what did he just play? Or what did he just do? And two of the greatest highlights, they'll always be in the top five or top 10 of both Julius Erving. One, the layup against the Lakers uh, in the playoffs where he goes under the basket and comes around and lays it in, and rocking the baby with him and over Michael Cooper, and they both got their heads above the rim. Okay, now
Who
so
who could both of those clips?
yeah, and so it's one of them kind of things that Cooper said. I thought I was gonna block it till we both got up in the air, and I just wanted to duck and get out the way. But nobody had ever done that, okay? Or to be 6'7" dunking on a guy 7'2". So but after that, you get Dominique and you get Michael. But they could do that because they saw Doc. But Doc could do that because he saw Baylor. So
And they all say that.
and they all right. And so
So what we gotta not be confused by is the press.
right.
That's
And
the
so
that's
so
and
yes,
and
yes,
staying
yes, attorney.
and
Yes,
staying
attorney.
true
That's the problem.
to who
That's
we
the
are.
problem. Is that we're vulnerable. We're vulnerable to the press because Mike, he give it up to everybody, and Dominique gave it up to everybody. And I don't know. I mean, because of the press and the selectivity, LeBron might be giving it up to everybody.
Yeah. Well, here is the the thing that makes a transformational player great or different. There are a lot of great athletes and musicians that can do it after they see it or hear it. Okay, yeah, I could play that, but I didn't have that kind of imagination.
I
I
wouldn't have
had
taken
the
that
skill,
line. I wouldn't have
huh?
taken that line. That's
Right, I
the
wouldn't.
line I wouldn't have taken. I mean,
Right,
before I saw your putt, I didn't know it was going to break that way.
right, exactly. So that's why I talk about transformational musicians or transformational players.
And
They
so,
change. They change the way you can hear older guys and they can all tell you the first time they heard Charlie Parker.
And that brings us right back to Asada Shakur.
Right.
We,
that's what I was about to say, Larry.
we
And
need
that's
to
and so the
take
whole thing is that Asada Shakur is a game changer.
exactly.
And that was thank you, Larry, because that was I was trying to work back to that point. She is that. We don't understand her as that because of white folks.
And you talked about the press. You just talked about the media.
It's the press and the propaganda.
Mhm.
Asada Shakur, for us, and when I say us, I'm talking about folks that was born in the 50s and the 60s. She Harriet Tubman, literally, literally. That's who she is. She fought the fight, won the fight, and then had a place to go for respite. We don't like Cuba, black folks. We don't like Cuba because the United States don't like Cuba. But Cuba is instrumental in all black liberation struggles
Around the world. I mean,
around the world.
it was just
When
referenced by the minister of Ghana at the UN,
this
and
is what this is
and
what they do.
and he
Yes,
wants to lift the embargoes on Cuba that the United States is profit right now. So yeah,
yes,
so yeah,
yes.
so this is a good
Yes.
point to close on
She
Doc.
is a part of that struggle. Asada Shakur is a warrior. She is a part of that struggle, and we need to understand her as such.
And when we do what we're supposed to do and create the nation that we're supposed to create, she should be one of the very first stamps that we issue.
Absolutely.
So, on that note, we want to thank you all. I'm glad to have you back, Mike. And we're going to close. And I just want to say this. You all have given example after example after example on how to transition into this enterprise is harmful. Mike, you give the example of a Stringer Bell going downtown and his man tell him they saw your black ass a mile
Oh,
away.
man.
If if you look at Castellano, I watch the Alto Kings. You look at Castellano when he stopped trying to be a gangster and tried to assimilate into this thing. That's when he got into trouble. And we have got to understand that this is a transactional. Mike Jones has told us a million times. This is a transactional relationship with this place. And we need to maintain who we were. Dr. Alexander, you talked about the consciousness in the face of a wicked system, the NBA, Michael Jordan had. And that grounding, that centering is what allowed him to do what he's done. We need to do that as a people and continue to understand that this thing is not beneficial to anyone, but it is deadly to us across.
Larry, on closing, you mentioned Stringer, and I consider why one of the 10 great works of film or art because he's got so much. But and you mentioned what Avon told Stringer about uh, downtown, the senator. One of the things, that conversation between them when Stringer was talking about all that they could do now,
Mm.
and Avon, he's explaining where they are and all the things that they could do and what we don't have to do anymore. And Avon just listens, and he then says, "But I'm not a suit wearing businessman like you. And I'm just a gangster, I suppose, and I want my corners." Fundamentally, that is that we need to understand that conversation as an existential conversation about who you go choose to be in these moments when you have to choose. And that if you got limited imagination and don't spend a lot of time thinking, you just see it as a dialogue between two drug dealers but they having a much more profound
Much
conversation
more,
about identity and purpose, and that's what that conversation represents.
and legitimizing something that's not legitimate.
Right.
The American narrative, the myth is not legitimate. And
Because it ain't who we are.
it ain't who we are, and it doesn't serve us. So
So Larry, to your point, it's a myth.
it is a myth.
The American myth is exactly that. It's a myth.
It's a myth.
It's
So
not historically accurate. It's a myth.
it's a myth.
And that's where we started.
And that's where we started, and that's where we are going to break right now. And until next time, we want to thank you all for joining us on the level set, and we look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.